And we're back. Always wanted to say that. Folks, it's just after 7 o'clock. It's December 17th, 2015. This is the Newmarket School Board coming back into session. We've been in recess. I'll update you in a moment, but as I call the meeting to order, I'd ask everyone to rise and join Julia in Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For those just joining us here and at home, the board went into session at 5:30 with members of the search committee, superintendent search committee, for somewhere on the order of 40 minutes. We worked with those folks. We had a reporting out on the process of the superintendent search dating back to May, when we sought the help of a consulting organization to help us with that search, straight through to very recently. The agenda called for the announcement of finalists, and we opened that session at 5:30 by alerting everyone that we are not quite where we wanted to be. And we just haven't got a couple of more tidbits of information and a couple of more phone calls responded to in order to make that public announcement tonight. We anticipate that we'll do so either tomorrow or first thing next week. And when we get into the calendar of events and the review of the calendar, please pay attention to the additions that we make, because we'll talk about public opportunity to participate in the remainder of the search process. Following that, we went non-public to discuss that process, the hiring of a public employee, and we have been in recess, and so now I call this meeting to order and would move straight into public comment if there are those among us who would like to offer comment. Hey, please come right up to the microphone.
Okay.
We'd love your name and where you live and.
Okay. Well, my name is Morgan Young. I live on Ashmont Road.
Perfect. Welcome.
And I just kind of have like two questions. First, what we plan to do with the area next to the elementary school and across from the high school. I've heard rumors like building a field across from the high school or a parking lot. I've seen buses parked across from there. I don't know if it's like open to discussion, but I was just wondering if. Yeah,
I heard that Walmart was coming.
Okay.
There are, the school district is continuing, the school board with members of the community continuing with the ongoing conversation about school facilities. And so I guess the most honest answer is, right now there is no plan, no real firm plan for what used to be Carpenter's, the property that we finally cleaned and cleared and made safe and monitorable with a nice spotlight at night by members of Newmarket's own. And there's no real plan right now either for what will happen at the elementary school. All of that is part of the conversation that the Facilities Committee has been pursuing. So we just appreciate the opportunity to publicly say, don't anybody dump anything there or make a mess or create any hazards, because right now the space across from the high school is safe. It's safe and clear. So, but that's an ongoing conversation, and I appreciate the question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. How'd I do? Is that okay?
Yes.
Fair? Anybody else?
I asked if she had any good thoughts.
Does she have any ideas? Yeah, go ahead. He's got a vacancy on the committee. No other public comment. Thank you very much. Then we'll move on with our meeting, and we'll invite Julia to offer her report, and then we'll talk about our upcoming events.
All right, so to start off with sports, the boys basketball team is 2-1, and their next game is away at Concord Christian, and the girls are 1-3, and their next game is home against Concord Christian, and both of these games take place on Friday. Hockey's first game was tonight. I'm not sure how they did, but I know it took place a little bit before this meeting started, and they were playing against Kingswood tonight. The math team has its next meet, and it's going to be a home meet, so that's exciting. It's going to be in January. And the winter concert is tonight, as everyone probably knows.
I need to say out loud to my daughter, who this is the third winter concert since I joined the board that I can't make because we're sitting here doing this. And this is a really important thing that we do, but tonight we're recording that concert, so I'll be able to watch it on tape delay. Thank you so much. In our packets, we had a calendar for December and January. I'd ask that you look at that. And added to what Julia has shared with us, I'd remind everybody that school vacation starts next week on the 24th. There'll be no school on Thursday or Friday or the week that follows. Looking out to January, and here I draw your attention to the superintendent process, the superintendent search. We'll come back into school on Monday, the 4th of January at all grades. And right now, we tentatively plan that our finalist candidates for the superintendency will join us in the district on Wednesday, the 6th. We have delayed the process. We had talked last time that we were in session, we talked about the 21st or 2nd. It was a lot to push, and we're determined to do it right. And so in an effort to do it right and to do it well, we're looking now at the 6th of January. That will be a day when finalists will be in the district. We expect that they will meet in the schools, tour the schools briefly, and meet with groups of students and staff, our faculty, our administrators. Before the day is done, they'll have an opportunity to meet with central office administrators as well as community leaders. At something like 6:30 that night, Wednesday the 6th, please make a note and plan to join us probably at the junior senior high school and probably again at 6:30 for an opportunity to meet and greet the candidates, to ask questions and to participate. And as I said earlier when we were talking about the search process in the work session, feedback is going to be really important. There will be a feedback device, a form that you can use to submit your thoughts and your feedback about the time that you spend and your observations of the candidates. That'll be really important to the school board, that everyone who can participate. And that feedback will be collected, by the way, all day long from all of the different constituent groups that we'll have the candidates interacting with. But specifically to the community members, I say, join us that night. There'll be an opportunity to meet with each of the finalists that are there and to offer your feedback, and the board will take that very seriously. We'll be back in session as a school board on the 7th. And right now, the hearing on the budget, the school board's, the budget committee's public hearing on the school budget is planned for Monday night, the 11th. Anything else that's coming right up? Okay. The first item on our agenda tonight for discussion is the calendar for 2016-17. At this point, the superintendent has asked me to make a plan to put that on the agenda for January 7th, and all parties involved will ensure that the next time we see that calendar, we'll be voting its approval. So stay tuned for the 16-17 calendar discussion, which will be our next meeting on the 7th. Next up is an application with FEMA, and Mike or Christine, somebody want to?
Christine led this effort, and I think she should report.
Okay. So back in March, which seems so long ago, President Obama declared a major disaster in the state of New Hampshire for the winter storm that we had back in January, the 26th to the 28th. And the major disaster declaration allowed applicants from the counties of Hillsborough, Rockingham, and Stratford, town and schools, to be eligible to receive federal assistance. And so there was a application and process. There was a general meeting that we needed to attend to go through the process, and we had to finalize all of our invoices, all of our expenses that we inherited due to that winter storm. And so we applied for reimbursement, and we were granted and we were awarded. So the original cost of the request was around $6,500, and of which was approved, but we only are eligible for 75% of the expenses that we incurred. So the good news was we went through the process, we got approved, and we were awarded, so we got the money. We got about $4,900 back. And so just thought I would report that as good information that we have.
Excellent, thank you very much. Any questions? You don't need a motion for us to accept, you'll just go ahead and, Put that right in the general fund?
Yep, right into the revenues.
The next three items on our agenda are the warrant, our search, and facilities. And we've had plenty of conversation about search, so I don't know that we have a whole lot more for that. The warrant is largely connected to the conversation happening at facilities, at least Article number 1. And so I guess what I would do right now is, let me just take the board to the warrant and skip number 1, and tell you, maybe I'll do one step better. Did I hand one out?
No.
Here, we filled in a couple of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We filled in a few more blanks, just trying to move it forward and make it as much more accurate as we could, although nothing significant happening, I guess, in that. But as you look at it, your operating budget, we've moved forward to the Budget Committee. We've adopted, or we've agreed to, our default budget. The tax impact, by the way, the tax impact language will be added later. Tonight, we're going to take a few minutes to consider the teacher negotiation, that tentative agreement, and hopefully take a vote to approve that. And then the rest of the ballot is continuing to take shape. So that'll continue to be a work in progress. All that yellow represents questions,
Okay.
things that, are still in flux that we just, we put it on there. I know we've been talking some about the trust funds, about any dollars that we might want to use under the language that we've used in the past, about taking out elements of the fund balance and moving them there. But we're going to have to meet at some point sooner than later to wrap this up so that we can get all appropriations forward to the Budget Committee so that they can be considering those on our warrant. Any thoughts or questions about that, other than Article number 1? And I guess I'm going to move forward to the,
So, we next meet again on January 7th. That's cutting it tight, right?
that's real tight. I think we may have to
We may have to,
schedule another special meeting so that we can decide. And I think part of what, the language of the other articles is somewhat statutory, and, the numbers are coming on the teacher agreement if we approve it tonight. And at some point, for instance, if we want to raise and appropriate anything from the trust fund into the technology trust fund, we've got to make a decision to do that. We may be able to do some of that tonight, but I think a lot of it rests on where we stand on Article number 1, which right now we've had as a placeholder for potentially a bonded article for architectural engineering fees. We had some live conversations, some hot conversation about that in the last couple of sessions, and so I bring us back to that conversation. But maybe first, Mike, you want to talk about facilities and kind of update us on the conversation we've been having there, as that may be relevant to what we do next.
yeah, yep, sorry. We met last night, the Facilities Committee met, along with the principals, Chris Andruski and Sean Pine, and we went over a underlined draft version of educational specifications. And basically what those are, it indicates the existing space in both of the schools and recommended space. Now, the idea here is that you list every space as they exist, and then the administrators and the staff go through and they say, well, maybe this is what we would need. We have, frankly, some more work to do on these. We have more work to do as the administration's going to go back and work on them. And then ultimately, before too long, the board will need to sit down with the principals to really, sharpen our pencils and go over these, because these are the foundational documents, along with Dr. Joyce's report, that will underlie any building program, whatever that may be. And they need some work. I mean, they're draft. I do appreciate the work that went into them, but we got a little ways to go. I think we'll get there. What we'd like to do, there's some notes on these. We'd like to add a couple of more columns to reflect what certain of these spaces are vis-a-vis the Joyce report, because a lot of these are in line directly in line with the Joyce report, like, for instance, science classrooms and math classrooms. They're right there. But there's also another category, and it really, and this is the heart of any school building vote, is wants versus needs. And there are some things in there, for instance, an auditorium, and that's always a hot button issue on these school projects. And these are things that ultimately, in the public part of the process, the public input part of the process, we're going to have to lay out there what the options are. And you can't get everything. And there'll be some things that, you know, we may get support on and some that aren't. And that process is yet to come. But I think, to be clear, to have an understandable document, we really need to lay, that's another column, you know, want versus a need column. And so they're working on that. But before too long, we'll have to do that because we're going to come to the end of the sort of schematic, high-level phase with a Banwell firm. And we're really going to have to narrow in and get public input and, you know, get to a point where we're gonna choose our solution. So that's all we went over there. We also discussed very briefly, three of us, Mark, Fillion, and Skip Manso, and I walked a property directly behind the elementary school on Sunday. We physically walked out there. It's owned currently by the Durrell Association. It's part of their open space. And we're exploring a swap of that land for some wetlands that the school owns along Durrell Drive. It would just be an even swap, which may be another warrant article. I don't know the law on that. I don't know if for just a swap, but we ought to look at that as well.
Quickly. Yep.
But that wouldn't be a complicated warrant article in all events if it requires one. The idea being there's interest in making that swap. It's something that was discussed years ago as an easement. An easement's more complicated because they still own it and you got to provide insurance and all that. This would be relatively easy. Now, it's all ledge. You can see it. I didn't realize how steep it was when you go back there. So this isn't anything where you can cut down the trees and throw up a playground. It would require like massive amounts of blasting. But what it may give us is if we have to move an access road back a little bit, it may be feasible to do that, you know. But in any event, it's I hate the term no-brainer, but it is. I mean, it's potentially usable to us.
And the land that that we were talking about swapping is not usable to us by us for any reason.
Well, yeah, and you could never, usable may not be the word. It's a nice swampy area. There's a lot of wildlife in there. It's kind of cool to have that right near the school. It's like a little science project in itself, and so isn't this. This is like you have all of geography like within a couple of acres of the school. You have granite outcroppings, and you have the swamp, and but you couldn't build on it. You couldn't do anything like that with it. But so that's that. We also we walked over to that property that's for sale along that's parallel
South
with
Main, right?
Yeah, South Main, and the impression there, as Dr. Joyce recommended and as Ingrid has recommended, is that if the district can, that they acquire that property. There's only so many. That may be the only adjacent property other than
In front of us. Yep.
and it would really allow some potential uses. An access road, for instance, might be able to be used over there. Maybe a better area for a playground as well. So that we talked about that a little bit. So and that's it.
So, for what it's worth, as a placeholder for the conversation about potential property acquisition or the swap, we have included an article, no dollars and no details, but as a placeholder, Article 4 might look like that, for instance. And so we should find ourselves an opportunity before the night's over to go non-public and talk about property acquisition and make sure that the superintendent has direction with regard to that. Let's go back to the proposed article. When we've talked not too long back, 1 meeting ago or 2 meetings ago, we had 2 meetings ago, I guess, because we went and put the language in here to start talking about it. We talked about an article that might provide for a measurable dollar amount for architect, engineering, design work to actually get buildable documents in anticipation of going to bid prior to the March 17 vote, so that we'd have a number to swing at there. I'd invite the board to contemplate that and have some more conversations so that we can move that conversation forward with regard to the ballot, or the warrant, I mean. Are there,
Well, just to refresh the idea a little bit,
Yeah.
the idea of that was that, that we won't be ready for a project vote this March, and so not being ready for that, what's another alternative to move this along as best we can? And the alternative would be to, have a warrant article for design fees. Again, we have never gotten to there as a community. I mean, you hear people talking about how much we've spent on engineers and architects before. Well, it's never been on the design phase. It's always been on the pre-bond schematic phase. And so again, just to go through a timeline, since we wouldn't be ready for a project vote this March, theoretically, if you had enough funds available to do design, and we were comfortable as a board after community input, we got to a point where we know which direction we're going to go in, you could have the architect begin doing design drawings. And I'm talking, this is a 30,000-foot thumbnail sketch of everything. And then with the theory that, those would be done over the summer, they take a while to do, you could put it out to bid, and with a project vote in March 17, if presuming it would pass, you'd begin, construction right away. Otherwise, with a project vote in March without design drawings, you have to take the summer to do those, and you lose that amount of time. It's an interesting idea as long as the process is far enough along that you have an idea of what you're going to build and what the rough cost of it's going to be. As much, and I've literally lost sleep going back and forth over this, and I've run, because I want to move the thing along, and but I don't want to lose the momentum we have, by prematurely proposing something that people aren't comfortable with. And just anecdotally going around the community, going to Christmas parties and whatnot, people aren't, by and large, tuned into this. So my fear is that we would spend the next couple of months between now and March, trying to explain something that's somewhat unexplainable. That we don't have a definite plan yet. We don't know the exact cost. We're getting there. We're not there yet, but nevertheless, on faith, vote in these fees so we can get going. It's a tough argument to make, especially when you're coming off, some, I don't know what the word is, but some doubt, from the last vote. I just think that it may trip up our progress, quite frankly, and I've heard that from many people, and many people who are supportive of the process, and many people who want to see something done, not just people who I haven't run into any people who just want to kick this down the road for the sake of kicking it down the road. In fact, there was some support from facility committee members that, for it, but on further consideration, they in having talked to other people, they came back to me and said, "Boy, I don't know if this is the right thing to do." So I don't know what others think. So.
Well, we've kind of talked about this. Is there a way where, because we're going to still have the conversation, the facility's going to go on.
Yep.
And maybe April, May, we would have an idea of where we want to go. We meet with the public. Do we have funds to get floor plans and something that we could start with so that when March came, we could vote, we could start construction that June? So we're not looking 3 years down the road. We're only looking maybe a year, another year.
And that was the whole idea with the concept. There's two questions there. Do we have the funds? Typically, the fee of an architect and engineer is roughly 6 to 9% of total construction costs. And when you're looking at the scale of a project that we're looking at, if you use the JEC report, or we know what we have to do, and it's to both schools. I guess the answer is, right now we don't have the funds. That's why we would do a warrant article. The second question, we will keep the process going, just like we would under a normal pre-bond process leading up to. This is what's been done before with Ingrid. I mean, that's what we contemplated originally, and we'd move the process along. So we would have a we'd have a particular design, not the design drawings, and we'd have a cost estimate, after hiring a cost estimator. But we wouldn't be ready to go in June of 17.
Go back to that then, because one of the, I mean, as I'm remembering it, the Banwell deal, the contract that we entered into with Banwell to talk about this pre-bond phase was small dollar comparatively. You're not talking about 1 point anything, you're talking about 20,000, I think. So, and that's not, she's not gonna keep working for an entire year on that, given the pace and the amount of work and the stuff that we're talking about. Nor does that pick up estimators and any other engineering analysis that needs to be done. So, is there a chance, do you think, that we could get to a number? And I'm thinking like $100,000 or less, a number that might be might be dollars that we should either raise and appropriate through an article or push into the dual purpose so that we have it to use against whatever comes next. If you put 80,000 in there and we had to use 30 or 40 of it for, an estimator, a good estimator that you pay is gonna cost us money, right? It's not gonna be and so is there any chance that we could put together a slate of those fees so that there could be an article, again, either raising, appropriating, or moving into that trust, so that we'd have that through the duration of this next year to be able to fund the ongoing work of Banwell with the committee and with this process, and then contract for any of that additional engineering. Multiple times I've heard comments about structural, and obviously an estimator.
So the answer is yes, and I think it's in the range you're talking about, probably 100 to 150. But we may already have funds, and the trust funds.
I didn't bring my trust fund up.
That we-
I actually have updates because I just went to the
You
CIP.
do?
Yep.
Good.
Let me.
Well, it seems to me the real question is for public understanding. We need to work backwards and say the school
Okay.
building, our occupancy date will be X if we don't fully fund the architectural and engineering work. And if we only partially fund it, does that in fact change that date? Am I being clear?
I think so. I think, let me put it differently if I may. I just think if you don't have the design drawings done by the time of a March 17th vote, you're probably not going to be ready because you're not ready to go out to bid.
Yeah.
So it may effectively delay it. And when I say delay, I mean, it's kind of the path we're on right now anyways, if we didn't do this warrant article. So it's not delaying it further by not doing a warrant article. It's just that you'd be in the normal time frame of having a project vote, doing the drawings, and then, breaking ground the following year, because you won't break ground in the winter.
Let me phrase it differently. If we had the 7 or 8 or 9% architectural engineering fees approved in March, when would we expect for the building to be occupiable? Or start, either.
When the construction start, I mean, it would be soon after a March 2017 project vote.
Okay, if we
Yeah.
did not have this warrant article approved for engineering, architectural, and so forth, when would the construction begin?
Most likely a year later.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you
So-
raise the money now, spring of 17.
Right.
If you don't raise it until the full project is voted, spring of 18.
And that makes good sense. And from my own opinion, I've also attended a number of gatherings, and I agree with you. I don't think people have, not that it's not available, but I don't think people have the information. I think, and I'm not sure we haven't done a good job, but I don't hear clarity from folks about what we're doing. And I would say, based on our past performance as a citizen, I may be doubtful about supporting can I use a number?
One-
A $1 million
Right.
warrant article.
Right.
I just get the sense that, and my input is very limited. But I just don't feel that people would, that I know would feel comfortable saying, yeah, we'll trust you. Go ahead and pass a warrant article for $1 million. And yes, we know we'll have an opportunity to make the decision about what that $1 million is going to be spent on. But that's just my opinion.
It's disappointing, to say the least. But I don't, again, we need that leadership that gets the newsletters out, that we need to get the community support again. We, as a school board, need to rile the community up again. So, and the way we're gonna start that is by picking the right superintendent to get that started. And then we will have to start putting out a newsletter and just maybe starting, you already started Facilities Facebook page.
Yeah, and let's not, look, everybody wants to move this along. There's no doubt about that. We all want to do, and it's precisely because we want to move it along and you really get it done this time that, we've been playing tennis in our minds on this particular issue. And literally, it's all I've thought about really, my free time for the past, since we sort of talked about it. And I don't profess to have a crystal ball or know the right answer to this one. Maybe it would pass, maybe it won't. I just, the bulk of the feedback I've been getting from well-intended people who want to see this pass is don't do it. You guys are heading in the right direction. A couple of things will happen. You're basically saying, we don't know what we're going to build yet. We don't know how much it's going to cost, but give me $1.5 million to design it. And that's just a tough argument to make. And before you've had the public input, you're basically asking for it on faith. And we'll get to that point. We're just not there yet. And it's unfortunate we have a once-a-year vote, and there's no real alternative to that. I don't think we would qualify for any emergencies. So
Right.
in New Hampshire, you've got to wait every year.
And now,
It stinks because maybe in 5 months from now, we'd be, or less maybe, we'd have a lot more clarity. We'd have the public input, but I think it's a risk. And we have a lot to do. The board has done good things. It's come a long way in a year. We're on the verge of selecting a superintendent, getting a contract done. What else have we done? We've come this far on this facilities thing. I think if we were to propose this, we would spend all of our time over the next couple months trying to educate and sort of support a warrant article that I think people would be skeptical about. Not everybody, because some people are in tune to the issue, but I constantly have to remind myself that not everybody thinks about this stuff all the time. Most people don't. Anecdotally, I went to a Christmas party over the weekend. Some people didn't know I was on the school board. It got worse. And this was before the drinking started. So I mean, you have to deal with that reality, and it's, we're doing good things. Let's not get off the rails here. So, as much as I want to, I'd love to. We didn't bring up the idea, for fun. We wanted to move we want to move this along. So,
the thing I'd love to be able to do is to put a warrant article on for $1 million or whatever it is, and have the credibility to convince the community that we will not spend that $1 million until they've blessed the direction we're going. But I'm not sure we have.
Are you saying that poster that says "Trust us"?
Yeah.
Wouldn't work.
And our track record ain't great, so I'm supportive of holding off. As much as I hate to see the construction begin yet another year later.
I won't name names, but there's several on the facilities committee who supported this, and where a year ago they might not have. And I think it's because of trust built up. But those same people also realize the wisdom and not pushing it forward, and that everybody doesn't have the knowledge that we do, and they're not up to speed, and they don't have the trust. So.
All I can say is I'm not aware I've been invited to any Christmas parties. But I,
That tells you something.
it does, clearly does. And, but I do hang out at Market Basket a fair amount, and, no, so.
Can I just add one more part? I mean, it seems like we're turning the corner in terms of, big projects, and that, in the school board collectively, we'll have more time to really drill down on this and focus on it, and we need that. We've got good people on the facilities committee, but we need to, we need to, as a board, like I said, the ed specs, that's the real work here. I mean, that's the foundation. If you get that right and you can get buy-in, I mean, I wouldn't say the rest of the part is easy, but the rest of the part sort of falls in place.
Well, and we've got, with a new superintendent coming on board in the transition, if we do come to the point, one of the things we've talked about repeatedly, right, is that we get to the May or June timeframe, and then we just sit in limbo because we're not able to move forward. And so I think we ought to continue to have the conversation about a smaller article that would not bond and borrow, right, but would move, would try to address things like the cost estimation and such that are coming. At the same time, recognizing that a new superintendent's going to come in and as part of a 100-day plan is likely going to lead us into strategic planning soon, which could have an impact on program, and there could be things that we want to talk about. So, I'm disappointed as well. You consider the leaps and bounds that we've made from whence we've come, but let's continue to have patience.
Yeah.
And do the right thing and do it well, carrying the conversation forward. And if right now we have been so busy doing that we have not been as strong at communicating, I mean, I know we try really hard to be more transparent, to tackle these things as publicly as we can, and the committee work that we've done and such has been really consistent with that. I'm okay if at this point we back away from a bonding of dollars like that on faith and look very realistically at what it is we think we need to have to make sure that we can tackle those things as they come.
And to be clear, we're not slowing the train down.
Nope.
We're still going, and, and I think even, with our current trust funds, we'll have the money to do all we need to do in the next year. And, look at the last two times that this, school projects have been proposed. It's sort of, you haven't really had much of a lead-up time between proposal and vote, and I think we may have that opportunity this time for a vote for a project for next year that we'll have this thing sort of wrapped up by the summer, and then you can really get out there, and that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a grassroots sort of, even before we get there, with public input on the design and the wants and needs. But boy, wouldn't that be great to have all that time where the board can get out and educate people and shake hands, and our new superintendent. And, I mean, something you said, Nate, I mean, it's kind of like, we're baking the cake without the chef here. It would be nice to have the superintendent's input a little bit on.
And that'll be the perfect time when that person gets introduced to the public. That's the good time to start talking about this and where we are at that time. So we're looking at an article that will have.
Well, I think we need to talk, are we going to raise and appropriate, or we want to use it?
I'm not an expert on these
Yeah.
trust funds yet,
Well,
so.
The page just came around. I heard you mention it, so thank you, Christine, for having this. There are 6 trust funds that exist right now in the schools. If I start in the top right-hand corner of the document, the School Repair and Maintenance Trust, we put dollars into that this last cycle. Our intent being, we knew that there was the potential for boiler concern. And we wanted to have funds that we could attack that project if need be, create redundancy, and to continue to provide for ourselves the opportunity to do it right and take our time with this facilities conversation. I don't know that any of those dollars, by the purpose of that fund, would be appropriate for what we're discussing now. Technology, in our conversation about CIP and the planning work that we did with Jason Carey when he was here last, I think that will continue to move in the direction of using that more like the town uses its trust funds, in terms of appropriating dollars into that for our inventory turn and our regular technology purchases. I know the Utility Capital Reserve was created some years back, and we seeded it to help with changing costs related to gas, oil, or the like. And then if I pop back up, our conversation about property might be, buoyed by the balance here. There's a $70,000, $71,000 balance in the expansion of school trust fund.
Is that a potential candidate for this?
That's a capital reserve, so that one, it says trust, but it is a capital reserve as opposed to an expendable trust. So it might be a candidate for funding. I don't know what the specific purpose is. I don't know that it's,
It would be, yeah, you can use that, and that's just the only one that you're not the agents to expend, so it would
Yep.
have to be voted on at the
So that would be on the
ballot.
On a warrant?
Yeah,
Okay.
expansion school trust fund. The purpose of the fund is expansion of school facilities, okay? So, and then, of course, the special ed trust fund, which sits as a protection against unanticipated or rapidly changing special ed costs. And the dual purpose fund, which we have used most recently with regard to the fire and life safety
There's not-
modifications, has got 3,000 left in it.
We're gonna add to that.
So we did not appropriate to that in that last cycle as we did that last phase, and so that has been drained. So we could either, for instance, write an article that would draw down on the expansion trust. If we do face a purchase of property, we could use that for that purpose as well. Or we could raise you can raise an appropriate, or you could simply move. Part of it is as we're estimating what that dollar amount would be. I mentioned, for instance, the dual purpose fund with 3,000 in it. If you thought we needed $100,000, let me pick that number. You said 100 to 150. If we needed 100,000, and that was based upon some discernible and defensible estimate that said we need a cost estimator, we need a structural engineer, and we're going to need something else, and we would put those together, we reasonably should do everything we can to skinny that and use as little as possible, and anything that would be left over would then be available to us
Right.
to apply against whatever the
Right.
project turns into.
Right. What we
ahead.
may be a little cautious about is, and Christine, you may know more about this, because we talked about it briefly, was this, if you do a warrant and you're in it for, hopefully it wouldn't fail on the numbers we're talking about here. It's a no means no thing where you can't expend any money on it. I don't understand the wisdom in that, but I guess it exists. So, can you expand on that, Christina? I mean, basically, if you do a warrant article for a particular,
for a specific purpose.
and it doesn't pass, you can't spend any money. If you had, like, say you already had it in some other part of your budget, you couldn't spend it? Is that your understanding? So, I don't know if doing a warrant article on, say, for instance, the expansion school trust fund would place us in that category, if that,
No, because you'd be putting money into that fund,
okay,
and that would be your purpose, so you
Right.
would raise and appropriate to fund.
okay. So that's not a risk there.
So I think, we talked a little bit ago about having another meeting. One of the things, our budget schedule is in here somewhere from back
We've
along.
got 3 weeks until the next board meeting, so,
When does the budget committee expect to or need to see? The 11th?
well, that's our meeting night.
That's the public hearing.
Right.
And so we need to
You have a
talk to
budget
the
committee member right here.
Yeah. So we
11th.
probably need to get.
11th?
Yep,
Is the
'cause
public
that's
hearing.
the public hearing.
But you guys would really, I'm sure, like to have a swing at this and have a sense of it before we're publicly hearing it.
Yes.
We could reasonably, well, I say reasonably, we might impose upon the budget committee to not have yet had a chance to vote on and recommend or not recommend until after the budget hearing. Because you have the right to go back and reconsider that after hearing the public anyway,
All the warrants have to be done by January 19th.
correct? So between the 11th and the 19th is a tight timeline for you to, okay, so we could act on the 7th, but we should stay mindful of the idea that if we're not all traveling between Christmas and New Year's, we might want to have
Yeah.
a work session where we could at least review, because one of the things I'm looking at is could we have some discernible, defensible data that says, here reasonably is an estimate of this, and this is what makes up that
Yeah,
request.
and to emphasize, you made a good point, Nate. It's not meaning that it will be spent.
No.
But it can be, and we're, as always, sort of stewards and fiduciaries, that, you know, it gets spent wisely.
Although I think the fundamental question remains whether it's $100,000 or whether it's $1 million. And that is, the reward to the board is if we don't put it down, if we don't put it on a warrant article, we could rightfully be accused of kicking the can down the road, which is what we all said we would try not to do.
I wouldn't say rightfully, I'd say wrongfully
Well,
accused.
well,
Yeah.
you got my point.
Yeah.
And I can see it in the Exeter News, you know, school board continues to do what they've done before. And so do you say to yourself, well, I'm willing to do that because it's a safe thing to do, or do I do what I really think is in the best interest and hope that the community will support it? And that's the dilemma for me. I don't know. I mean, that's a political question, and I don't know the answer.
Well, I know the answer. I mean, we've got to have backbone and do what we think is best. And I think it's clear at this point that we all want to get this done. But it's for that reason that I wouldn't, and given the feedback I've gotten, that I wouldn't propose this right now. And I appreciate all the sort of the idea and the support for it, but I think this would set us back. And that's why, look, we talked about it before, and in these things, you know, given time, you go back and forth, and then you hear from more people, and you make a decision. I know we were all kind of high on it initially, and why were we high on it?
Right thing to do.
It would move the thing along, and we move the project along, and we all want to do that, but because we want to do it, I think it's pretty clear that it'll be confusing, I think, to most voters, and I'm skeptical it'll pass, and I'm fearful that it would set us back, and we don't have time to waste to be explaining a warrant article for the next 2 months that, you know, is sort of DOA.
Here's-
And
At
can I-
these Christmas parties y'all
Yeah.
go to,
You're not invited.
that I'm not invited to, I just hazard a guess that we've talked about the 100. You know, every time we have a public forum, it's the same 100 voices that we hear. And so we've said in the past, we need to be careful that we don't leap to that being representative, because it's active, it's vocal, and we appreciate their consistency, their loyalty to the process, and their effort and time. But they're not necessarily, they're to some extent the same 100 voices we hear out of 9,000 plus. And so the 100 populate some of these parties you're going to, and even then, there isn't necessarily the same level of attention to this conversation as we thought.
Absolutely not.
So that is motivating to me. And another year, I might actually be invited. And so I think, you know, really, I think if we have to wait on this, I want us to make sure we are empowered and enabled so that we can continue to do those things that we really need to do.
Al's point, I don't like to be hated, but I'm willing to be hated to do the right thing here. And immediately, it might be a little bit of disappointment, and one wonders whether we should have raised the idea at all. It's like promising a gift for Christmas and not delivering. But I think this is the right thing.
I would say I think it's the right thing, but I don't think we'll get the support to do it. And I think the downside is too big for me.
One of the things that I've said countless times is that we are at a point, you know, coming past last year's vote where we're in a positive momentum shift. People are working together from different sides of things, and I would hate for us to do anything that would push us back to a place we don't want to be, so that when March 17 comes, we're even at a worse position than we were before. So I think it's important for us to keep the momentum moving forward. Mike's doing a great job with the facilities committee and the people serving there. That's happening across section of the community, and we need to continue the momentum moving forward so that when we get to the point of real things, we have the best information we can.
You know, this isn't, there's not a lot of, the architects that we interviewed talked about examples of doing this, but it was where their projects were further along, you know, where they had knowing where they were going to go. and had a rough cost estimate. That's an easier pitch, because if we were there, I'd feel confident if we had the public buy-in, but I don't know as any major fee proposal like this has been done where we're kind of on faith and where we're at, so.
Is it the consensus of the board that I should have the staff strike Article 1, a bonding article, from the draft warrant, and create instead Article, whatever it would be, it would come after the teachers probably, it would be Article number 3 or 4, as a placeholder for some raising and appropriating or funding for the other elements that we've talked about, whether that's 50, 100, or 150, whatever the number that can be explained and justified. Or do we eliminate Article 1 and leave it at that? Any consensus there?
I would like to see us continue building momentum. Maybe not to the full extent that we initially talked about for the reasons that have been brought up, but I think we need to appropriate something to continue the process moving forward.
Yes?
I don't.
You don't?
No. And the reason I don't.
The same reasons.
Well, the reason I don't is whether it's 50,000 or 100,000 or $1 million, we've had this discussion about what we can do and what, I think the same issue resides in the voters' mind about approving money for something they haven't given their input to, they're not sure where it's going. I'd hate to lose the warrant article on $50,000. I mean, if we're gonna go for a home run here, let's go for it.
Meaning the downside would be the no means no.
Meaning, here you go again, guys, trying to get money from us without telling us what you want it for. But that's just my opinion.
No, I was thinking that if $100,000 is the number I'm going to use,
Yep.
that Mike was going to look at true cost and what that money would be utilized for. I understand Al's point about, but I think the attempt would be made to clarify where that money is going more clearly than originally with the larger amount. I might be wrong about that.
And also, it might give our community a chance just to rally around that number and say, listen, this was the original number, but we're gonna try to keep moving things forward. Here's a number we can either put it in the trust fund or keep it, but to see how much we need that can go into whatever's left over can go into the trust fund. So that's how that works. But I do think we have to give our community a chance to show they are paying attention, which I think they are. We just really haven't given them anything to pay attention to. Does that make sense? This might give a chance for conversations to start happening.
I mean, we could keep it an open issue and get some feedback, but you're right, you generally get the feedback from the interested few, not the broad
Not
community.
the broader community.
I think it's kind of in our laps, I'm afraid.
Well, I
We
mean,
have to make-
and this is why Ingrid and her firm, bid the way they did. They understand that it's tough to get money even pre-bond for architectural fees, and she acknowledges that her firm loses money on that phase, but they do it because what's the alternative? Being stuck perpetually not being able to
Not
get
being able to
design
get
fees,
design
and you
fees.
never get to the second stage. So they're sharing in the risk, that they're willing to do a lot of this work up front. And by the way, they're doing a great job. They really are. They've met all of our expectations. They've been great. And then some. And then, Ingrid's great, just good counsel. She's always there to, bounce ideas off of, and she's been really good, as everybody in her office has been. I think, we have the funds for the Banwell firm. We're all set there, but I mean, we're gonna need a cost estimator and maybe some engineering fees. I don't know, are we beating a dead horse to death, or do we wanna?
I guess I'm looking at the calendar right now, and I'm anticipating the possibility of at least a brief work session for the board in the week between Christmas and New Year's. And what I would ask is, can you get with Banwell and prepare for our consideration something that would quantify and explain any request that we might make, so that we can consider that one more time and then judge whether we think it's an appropriate risk, an appropriate ask. And at that meeting, I think we should take steps then to try to solidify that warrant so that it can be part of the can be part of our packet moving to January 8th, 7th, and maybe even have been shared with the Budget Committee so they can start to consider it.
Yeah.
Alternatively, we get to the 7th and we're trying to decide what it wants to be, and that doesn't give any time between then and the 11th for the Budget Committee to contemplate it. So if we could do that sooner, they may not be able to contemplate it in a meeting, because I don't know if they have another meeting scheduled before the 11th, but they could, at least as individuals, be doing the same work we're doing by looking at the stuff we've given them, so.
Yeah, and so the idea is all of the anticipated fees we would need to, get a proposal, a building proposal for 2017, whether that be Banwell, engineering, cost estimators, all of that. Okay.
It'd be great if you could do that.
Yep.
Do you want to do a date now? Do you want to kind of tentatively look at the 28th on a Monday, or is that?
28, 29, or 30. I mean, I don't know that we want to be here New Year's Eve.
Can I phone in?
Yep.
I'm going to be in Illinois, but I will be happy to be accessible by phone.
So everybody consider, and let's really go back and consider. We've had enough impact on our families and lives over the last couple of
Yes.
months, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So let me just, rather than us pegging a date, we can all,
Just
we
get
can
an
all,
idea.
you can swap emails with me about dates. But
The 29 works fine for me.
29 works good for you. Let's go back and make sure, because inevitably, somebody will go home and have crossed a date they shouldn't have, so.
I'd almost be in a position to call for a vote now, because I think we're looking in a crystal ball that's going to get perhaps a little clearer, but not, because we're not going to be right. But I do think that getting some additional information and getting maybe some input from the public wouldn't hurt.
Well, y'all are going to be at a bunch more parties, I'm sure, so help us out.
It's a real dilemma.
It is. This
Because-
is a hard one. And I think we had good momentum in mind when we talked about the million, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it would have been. But it's pretty compelling right now to say,
And
go ahead.
and if you bonded it, it would barely make a blip on the tax rate, but that's not the issue. The issue is the number and people wondering. I mean, there's real, I mean, it's amazing, there's confusion out there. People don't understand the difference between, the pre-bond phase and the design phase, which Newmarket has never gotten to. You hear comments like, boy, we've spent $1 million already on architects, and why do we need to do any more? And, I think you'd be dealing with that over the next couple of months if we propose this, but I've already said that.
and even with all that we're talking about right now in the next couple of months, we're still working on the superintendent search, among other things, right? I mean, there's some other things we just have to keep going on, so. Okay. We ready to move on? I gotta figure out how to deal with negotiations. I don't want us to have to pause, but I need us to go non-public, consider the terms of that, because until we are confident that we're ready to take a vote, it still is a negotiated item. And so what I would have us do is at some point tonight, go non-public and then come back as quickly as possible and in public session, take a vote and then, briefly talk about this. We'll be talking more about the warrant article as we roll forward.
Could we do it after the public session?
But we could do it, I mean, yeah, we'd have to, like I said, we'd have to come back into public session, but we can do that briefly for a vote. I'm
Oh, I see.
fairly confident that we're gonna find consensus. I mean, we've talked a couple of times in our negotiations prep about where we thought we'd land, so I guess what I'd do is I would defer that to later in the meeting, and I'd have us move right now into personnel and then policy. Hearing no objection, we have a nomination before us tonight in the position of Spanish at the senior high school. Joanna House is nominated to us by the high school and the superintendent, replacing Claudette Moran, and I would seek a motion to accept that nomination.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
We just want to thank Mrs. Moran for her service.
On a motion from Ms. McKinney, a second from Mr. Kennison, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And we're unanimous there. Was there anything else for personnel tonight? Okay. Hey, then, talk policy. The School Boards Association, of which we're a member, provides us with policy review, policy update, and they reflect new law being passed and policies that have to be considered as a part of an ongoing annual subscription that we have to their policy service. And so, most recently, we have received a packet that included some of the changes that are here. Our policy process seeks essentially a two hearing process, right? So you have a first reading and a second. Let me walk you through these briefly. There won't be any action taken tonight. There are some others as well, but we need to have some more conversation about them. First is an opportunity to review policy DKA, our payroll procedures. The only real change here is a legal reference because of a new statute that was enacted into law in the last session, effective, I believe, July 1st of 15. And so the language here didn't change, but the statutory reference is there. I can tell you that this new law spoke to a request that was made or an ongoing concern, which was that in many school districts throughout the state, hourly staff, most notably paraprofessionals, who are like teachers but not, were being paid a pseudo salary. Hey, you're going to work 181 student days. You're going to work 6.5 hours every day. You're going to get $13 or $14 an hour. You multiply it out, and we'll divide it up into equal paychecks just like teachers get. And in districts where there were any deductions to come out for health or dental or other benefits, it allowed the deductions to be level and the checks, because the checks were level, because otherwise on a time card basis, you've got you've got nine school days with 1 day off, and then you have a vacation where you have a 2-week pay cycle and you only work 5 days, and your check gets really small when it's actualized. And so schools had traditionally been simply paying them like they were salaried, which was really contrary to law.
Wage and hour laws won't.
Wage and hour laws won't let you. So they put forward legislation
To follow the law.
to essentially allow an exemption in this area with all kinds of tentacles of, but you still have to do this, and you still have to do this, you still have to do this. And it was opposed by some employer groups, but it passed. RSA 275 speaks to that now. So I don't know that it's really has an impact on us here, but in our policy, we're at least reflecting that that's another affected statute. So it's been a long time since we did policy. Do we take a motion on first read, or no, we just
No.
read it, you'll
We'll
note it,
just read it.
Jen will
And
note it?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a bigger one. Policy EEAA, video and audio surveillance on school property. I'm gonna just paraphrase this as best I can, but as I have heard it described, among other things, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation made a comment or made noise about putting cameras in classrooms in order to allow teachers the opportunity to reflect on instruction and to better, it's the whole notion of, if I record my interview, maybe I can go back and review what I did, and I can, anyway, they're talking about filming instruction. And a lot of folks talked about privacy issues related to that. And there was a real concern, and again, I'm paraphrasing, I haven't really been involved in the conversation, but I've heard a couple of brief presentations. There was a lot of concern, and so the legislature actually enacted statute that established a process by which we can record. We've talked about, for instance, flipped classes. The notion being you record the teacher providing the instruction, and instead of doing that during the day, you send the kids home with the video at night, watching it on the internet or what have you, so that they can watch it with mom and dad. And then the homework, the exercise and practice, which we try to do at home when mom and dad don't have the benefit of knowing how it was taught, we come back to school to do that practice with the educator, with the teacher right there. But even that, for instance, is recording, and it might record students, it might record teachers in classrooms. Anyway, what the statute calls for is you have to enact in policy, you have to hold a public hearing, and moving forward, you have to have the permission in a written manner from both staff and students in order to do any such recording. This is not intended to be an answer to the kid with a GoPro or people videotaping on their cell phones. This is the school district recording the school district in our own classrooms. I asked the administration, now, we already have student sign-offs
We do.
throughout
Yep.
on taking my picture and using it on the website or using what have you.
Computer use.
Computer use and stuff. What we probably have not done is had teachers sign off on pictures or video being taken of them. So now we have to take that same kind of document and make it applicable to teachers and then invite the teachers to sign off.
That's true.
So you can see the bold-faced one paragraph that's being added.
Yeah.
And moving forward, what I need to do is call for us to have some more conversation about this with a lot better preparation than I've got right now. And then have that public hearing, which would be taking a pause out of a meeting, for instance, noticing it on the agenda and then having that public hearing to provide an opportunity for any feedback. And then moving forward, we'd be able to record ourselves like that, so long as everybody's got their permission slip signed.
I know it isn't time for comment, but what it says is the administration must receive permission and consent from the classroom teacher, the parent, guardian of all students within the classroom. And the likelihood of unanimity, I did pretty well in that word, doesn't seem to me to be very likely. So it may be kind of a moot point.
Been a lot of conversation about this
Yep, statewide, there's been.
statewide. It's kind of presenting a struggle for superintendents and school districts.
Next policy up, EHAA, Computer Security, Email, and Internet Communications. Here again, there was new statute enacted, RSA 18968 speaks to student online personal information. And there's a new line or new paragraph section being added, that the district will take all necessary measures to maintain student privacy relative to the district's website, online information, and storage of student personally identifiable information as required by state and federal law. So again, school board's helping us to reflect statute as statute changes. A further extension of that same new statute is in policy GBJ, personnel records, where we add a paragraph that says the district will not disclose any teacher personally identifiable data or information to any person outside of the district except as may be required by law. Such data or information may be shared to district employees as necessary. And then the statutory reference is there. So there, as well as a revision being shared with us for first read. And then the last one tonight is policy JLCD, administering medication to students. There was either change or new statute, I'll tell you in just a second. New statute added concerning glucagon injections. And so that legal reference is added here. It didn't require any adjustment to the language of the policy because the policy's broad enough to pick that up, but we do reference that section in the RSAs. So those are first read. You'll see those come back, and there's some other policies we've got to turn our attention to moving forward.
Should we plan to vote on these on the 7th?
The 7th might be busy, but yeah, if we can, we will. But if not, what I might do is I might let these things float for another cycle and bring you the other policies that need some, which are a lot to do with social media. But I want the social media ones to have their time with the principals before it comes to us, so that they can contemplate really how it's happening, and Jason Carey as well, really what's happening in our schools, to make sure that we're not taking an unfair swing at something that we can't deliver on, so. In our packet are minutes from December 3rd. I'd seek a motion to approve the public and non-public minutes of the 3rd of December as presented.
So moved for public and non-public.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Was there anything that anybody saw in those? So the board met, well, I'll talk about that in a second. Hearing none, I have a motion from Ms. McKinney, a second from Mr. Kennison. All those in favor of the December 3rd minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? And we're unanimous. Before we leave minutes, let me just say for public consumption, we met on the 6th, we met again on the 13th, and I kept the minutes. I didn't get those to Penny in time for them to be included with this packet, and I will, so that we'll have them on the 7th of January for our review and approval. Manifests before us tonight. Does somebody have that number?
Al's got it.
Thank you. You should have just read it. I'd make a motion to approve the payroll and AP manifests for 12/17/15. Payroll in the amount of $265, $540.28, and accounts payable manifest to $86.34 for a total of $274,226.62.
On a motion from Mr. Zink, a second from Ms. Shelton. All those in favor of the manifest as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Then we're unanimous. How am I doing? Have I missed anything? We need to go non-public now, talk about negotiations. We'll do that as briefly as we can. We'll come back out and we'll declare ourselves in public session and take a vote, which, for public consumption, I certainly hope and anticipate will be a positive one. I can tell the public that today, the Teacher Association, no. Then I don't know yet, but we'll consider that tonight in just a few minutes. And anything else that should be before us before we adjourn?
Well, do we need to have,
I mean, not adjourn, sorry.
do we need
Anything
to
else
go
before
into
I-
non-public?
Yeah, anything else before we go to non-public?
Do we need to have that meeting if it's unapproved by the teachers? Oh.
The intent is, the intent is that, the intent was that both parties were seeking to ratify today. So, in order that we move it towards the ballot, if they were unable to meet or unable to finish, we'll take ours and approve, and then we'll negotiate with them more if need be, but.
Okay.
Just a
A motion to go, let me think. I don't know that I even need that's all right. I'm not looking at my non-public stuff. Let me look it up, wait a minute. In a public, if you,
Assuming it's approved?
yeah, assuming it's approved, yeah, I can't make it public until I know what the Teacher Association did, because we may have to go back into negotiations. So let me, but as soon as we can, we've got a bullet point sheet, and stuff that we'll get out and make public. That'll help.
Just wondering if I should go home or go back.
Go home, yeah. No, we won't,
So you're not gonna talk about
we won't talk about it tonight. We'll just take the vote if it's available to us, and then we'll adjourn. Thank you. And she left. I say that because we won't have the benefit of the camera, and I want to make sure that the camera catches whatever comments that we offer up, so. It is, yep. So we'll take our, let's seek a motion to go into non-public for negotiations.
So moved.
I've got that from Mike Kennison, and a second from
Me.
Elizabeth McKinney on a roll call vote. Mr. Zink?
Aye.
Ms. Shelton?
Aye.
Mr. Kennison?
Aye.
Ms. McKinney?
Aye.
Mr. Lunny is an aye. We are 5-0, and we are into non-public at 8:17.